This is a production of Cornell University.
For those who haven't noticed, we're on a little early here, and part of that's because we know we have some momentum. I think the show, we're in our seventh season now, right, Carl? Seventh season of doing this. We've done a bunch of shows. This started out just trying to talk into the ether when COVID was going on. In fact, Paige, you were a guest in our first season when we were all I was much younger then, for sure. Now I'm all gray haired and a grandpa to boot. So without any further ado, uh, most of and you see the picture behind me. I thought this was great. In the caption, the superintendent said these guys would much rather be running on grass. And we're certainly going to talk about the weather. Art Gaetano is going to be with us next week. I believe next week we're going to pivot to a Thursday show.
Yep.
And we'll talk a lot more about the winter weather, but we thought the combination of the popularity of the show, we always have something to say about things, right, Carl? And the urgency it's been a very interesting winter in the sense that we're not used to snow hanging around this long. And I think that's true from Maine to North Carolina, where the snow is persisting in places where it doesn't normally do that. Just got back from the GCSAA show, and automation was the topic of conversation. I think there must have been, I don't know what, Carl, 15, 20 different autonomous mower operations there. It was very interesting to see. And I figured, in the spirit of winter, why not get an autonomous snowblower? And it turns out there's a bunch of them available. And this Yarbo unit, we're actually looking into the Yarbo units for the Greenwood Cemetery. This, with the tracks on them, make them more durable in tough terrain for places that are going to be a little bit trickier to mow. I know they had the Husqvarna going up that steep slope, but Husqvarna is not going to do too well if it falls in a hole. And those little toys are not going to be as effective as these sort of bulky things. I don't think they're going to be as inexpensive as maybe those units are, but I think it's something to consider. Before we get to our conversation, which is going to be a lot about golf, if you've got synthetic turf and you got a lacrosse team that you're trying to please, I'm sure you're under pressure to clear off that synthetic turf so they can play. Does that mean it's safe for them to do? Now, one of the things I know, Carl, we've learned in the last few years, athletes don't really care about their safety. They care about how well they play. They don't care if they hit the ground and their head cracks open. That seems to be our job to worry about it. But even when we tell them about it, they don't seem to be, concerned. They're like, I want to play. I got to win, of course, here at Cornell with the national championship. That was a pretty big deal. It was a pretty big deal for us to win the national championship and then to now I think we're building an indoor facility and in hopes that they'll use it, but no guarantees. The snow is going to recede from the lawns. And for those in the lawn and landscape business, I'm sure they're going to see a fair amount of snow mold. If not that, they might see some winter desiccation of the higher cut turf where the leaves will be really brown. And we'll get into this later on. But I just, it's February. Right? We got a month easy till anybody should be thinking about anything. If anybody's calling you in the lawn and landscape business and say, what am I going to do about my lawn? Tell them to, Rip Van Winkle, go back to bed for another month before we do anything. Now, maybe in places like Virginia, where they've got cool season grasses, and maybe they'll start growing in the next couple of weeks, that would be different. But I'd say for sure, anybody in the Northeast should be just take it easy. We'll be ready for when it comes. Because again, it's been an unusually persistently cold winter, and we'll get more data on that next week. Before I give you the stage, Carl, I just wanted to say, golf is as healthy as it's been in my entire 35-year career in academics. I have never seen more projects going on, more golfers playing, more people complaining about traffic, superintendent excited about, being able to do infrastructure things that have been neglected for a while. This is Sean Rehorn's work up at Aldera outside of Seattle, where he's building a new putting green out there, a beautiful golf course outside of Seattle, Washington, and one of the many examples of how much is going on and how much it's going to cost. And it looks like, Carl, everybody's getting ready for these knuckleheads that are going to show up pretty soon, all of them with their hats on. So who are these people and what are we worried about?
This is our degenerate group of golfers here in Ithaca, New York. And this is us getting together in mid or late November just to play a skins game, right? And we're just happy to play golf if it's above 35 degrees and there's no snow. And for all the other golfers in northern areas who have a real winter, it has been a long time since we played golf. We had a really, you'll get into the weather, Frank, but a very cold November and basically December, January, February has been all snow and very cold. And we're itching to get ready. And so you mentioned the golfers. We're coming back out. And one of the sources of data we look at oftentimes with our New York State Park golf courses is this idea of capacity, rounds capacity. And this company Pellucid, run by Jim Copenhaver and Stuart Lindsay, they can basically predict how many rounds, the maximum number of rounds you can do in any given month based on the weather. So is it warm enough to play golf? Is it not raining? Is the sun out? What is the forecast like? And what we have on the screen here for those watching is capacity in a Hudson Valley location and a Long Island location for like the last 15 years. And you can see in March, there's a lot of variance with which we may or may not have golf. Some years, 4,500 rounds. Okay, you can make a lot of money on that. Other years, 2013 through 2015, basically no golf in March, either in the Hudson Valley or in Long Island. So you have a lot of variance here, and part of this is climate change. But if you look at those last, several years, 2017 to 2023, we see an increasing trend. And as a golfer, I love that. I want to play golf as early as I can. March, right? We're 2 weeks away from March. I would love to play golf in March. So we have more golfers. We know from COVID, golf has exploded. You talked about that, Frank. We have an increasing sort of trend in playing golf in these shoulder seasons. If I'm a golf course operator, how much money can I make from that? Well, let's say I fill 50% of those tee times. We call that utilization. Let's say I get 30 bucks around. Maybe someone pays a greens fee, maybe they drink a beer. In some years, I can make, man, 70 grand just in March. I don't really have to do anything to the golf course, right? I'm not mowing a lot. I'm not rolling. Just let people go out there. I could make a lot of money. And maybe if I open early and golfers know I'm the course that's open early, do I get this sort of early opener boost? Will they join my golf course? Is there some money to be made here?
So
But
I know you're channeling Elm Tree here, Carl. You're channeling your favorite public golf course that literally never closes.
Bruce will always let me go out there and play golf, and he calls me crazy and he says I have no life every time I do it. But of course, we're thinking on the golf course side, and this transitions into the work at Minnesota, the WinterTurf project, and we have Dr. Paige Boyle on here today. What happens to the grass if we let that early traffic go on there? There's some Oregon State research going on with traffic and frost and how that leads into long-term injury. How we prepare for maybe that early spring traffic with our snow mold applications. Those on the screen or who are watching can see Paul Koch. That's the same fungicide applied just 12 days apart for snow mold. Wow, huge difference in how that protected the turf. And then how we go into winter, the fall and the acclimation, the temperatures we expose the grass to, winter hardiness maybe is driven by that fall climatic period. So all of these things and like 10 other things that are going on in this winter turf project that we're going to talk about today. So I think, we got longer growing seasons, more potential for golf in the shoulders of the season. We have more golfers who want to play golf. Now we need to get to this cost benefit analysis that I think this winter turf project is doing a really nice job of evaluating. Will the turf get long lasting damage? And does that sort of take away from the money we could potentially make? And how can we optimize sort of our preparedness for early spring play? So that's sort of the setup here as we get into some of the winter and eventually
Yeah.
the conversation with
Yeah,
Paige.
and Carl, we're going to say some of the similar things, and with regard to setting Paige up for the conversation. And it starts with the weather pattern. We heard from Art Gaetano towards the end of last year that we were going to have this weak La Nina effect, and it was going to bring these kinds of conditions. I don't think anybody expected the cold to persist the way it did. It certainly was expected to be a little more snowy than normal, but I don't think anybody expected the cold to persist. And one of the things Art talked to us about is the warming of the pole of the planet is changing the gradient that has to exist between the equator and the pole, and that's really the governing one of the governing aspects of the jet stream. And as the jet stream starts to shift one way or the other, it determines whether, that cold air is going to sink down here if you're in a trough, or the warm air is going to come up if you're in a ridge. And again, we'll get into that quite a bit more next week. But either way, everybody's got this on their mind, Paige. Like, I haven't seen my golf course in a month. I haven't seen my golf course since November. I think there might be ice. I'm not sure there's ice. I think for me, as I think about winter injury, we're now in the biggest risk period. This period of time where whatever was there is going to start to go away, and then the spring's going to come, and you get these incipient freeze thaw periods where the things warm up, dormancy can break, and the plant gets susceptible. As Carl showed one of those ryegrass papers, this is a picture from Norway. It starts with what grass are you growing? Well, if you got bent grass under ice, it's going to be a lot better than Emily Merowitz's work at Michigan State that shows you leave Poa annua under ice for 60 days and you're going to start to see those problems. I was very interested, and I hadn't seen this paper Page until I poked around the winter site, which we're going to make sure we commend to everybody to go and visit as they start thinking about this. She's starting to find these effects on cuticular wax. Now, I've been fussing around with this since my days in Madison. This was the first time anybody's looked at anything like this. This is a really fascinating look because she's finding correlations between cuticular loss and electrolyte leakage, which is then, one of the reasons, we see damage, but also it's losing moisture. And as it starts to lose moisture, we start to see the ability for it to freeze. Same with Carl. I mean, the problem with winter injury, if you're struggling in the summer, right? It's heat and it's drought. A pathogen could get involved. But in the winter, you have a lot more complicated things that we really haven't learned to measure. Disease is the easiest one. This is the easiest one to figure out. Although I'd be very curious with the persistent snow, are they going to are the fungicides we use going to still be persisting, when the snow goes away? All right, Paige, the WinterTurf project. We've known each other of quite a while now, and now you're at the University of Minnesota working with this group that seems to have sensors all over the place. I loved seeing where the sensors were, but I got to say, this was my favorite picture of everything there. And I know from talking to Eric Watkins, this is actually a project too, born out of his relationship with a person who monitors the environment for their job. Right? The ability to monitor these things is what we've really lacked. Because, while we thought, oh yeah, freeze thaw, it's a length of ice. No one's ever measured anything like this project is measuring it. So here we go. We made it to you. I got some questions for the people who don't know anything about what we're talking about so they can access it. And I think, Carl, you put the link to the project in the chat. Let's start with who put the money up for this and how long has it been going on and who's involved? And then we'll get to the scope and learnings and other sorts of things. So let's start with funding, timeline, and cooperators.
Yeah, so this is a USDA project, a NEFA project. I think the original grant is from 2020.
NEFA? NEFA? What's NEFA?
It is the National Institute of Food and Agriculture.
Okay, it still exists?
Well, great question.
Who knows? It does
our
today.
funding still exists. We got a 1-year extension that we're coming up on the end of this year. So no cost extension, but we are looking for kind of next round of funding to continue this work. But as of right now, we're still going through the end of the summer. And it's a really big project. We have a lot of cooperators. It's kind of organized by UMN, but we have Wisconsin-Madison, Michigan, Massachusetts, Iowa, Rutgers, Oregon, and then NIBIO, so the Norwegian Institute.
Yeah.
We have cooperators over there as well. So a lot of people on the
All
project.
right. So what's the scope of the work? Because it sounds like, I mean, every place that gets winter to a certain extent is involved. Um,
Yes, as long as you're growing cool season grasses. We have a focus on cool season turf.
okay. That's
So
a
we don't do
different
any of the
animal
harvest
when we're
season.
talking about warm season
Right.
grasses. As we start to move them north, I'm sure they're not going to be very happy. And you're in Kansas City. Any
Yeah.
look right now? What they're looking like before we get to this project?
What the grasses are looking like?
Yeah, the warm season grasses.
Um, they're okay right now. We've had a pretty calm winter so far.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah, there's a cemetery up the road that they have Bermuda. So that's an
And
interesting
it's
one.
holding up good.
It's holding up okay.
All right. So, what about the scope of this project? Carl and I sort of made it sound like it's a dog's dish. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Can you tell us generally what's going on?
I mean, that is true. It is kind of an interesting project because we have six kind of broad objectives. So we have people looking at, breeding projects. We have management that covers, there's top dressing, there's leaf litter, there's traffic and wear tolerance, all of that kind of stuff. We have kind of our sensor modeling group that's looking at, we have 70 to 80 sensors on golf courses at any given time and looking at, carbon dioxide levels and oxygen levels under the turf when it is ice encased and things like that. We have physiology group that's looking at things like cuticular wax and all of
Yeah.
that kind of thing. We have um, disease work with Paul Koch and microdochium and snow mold, looking at modeling those and different fungicides and alternative fungicides. And so it does kind of cover everything. And then there's also this kind of outreach aspect as well, which is a lot of kind of my end of things of being that kind of first contact with a lot of the superintendent partners that we
Yeah.
have, and then all these blogs and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
So since you're the boss of the outreach, and this is an outreach endeavor here, right? We're extension folk here. When you've got to talk to people about what's going on, I mean, I read the latest update, which everybody can read on the website, and I know there's a regular newsletter. If they're
mhm.
interested in subscribing to it,
Yeah.
they can access, and we'll provide all that information page. But I'm going to challenge you a little bit to give me like a top five things. I mean, if you had to tell a superintendent all this money that the government has spent doing this, what would you say are some of the key learnings to date in some of the areas that we've mentioned already?
I think you already touched on one is the species matters.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily kind of one end all be all, unfortunately.
Well, I know Eric's interested in getting better ryegrasses. Have they
Yes,
learned more
there's a
about what's
lot of
involved in
research
making
on,
better ryegrasses?
yeah, there's a lot of research on ryegrass. A lot of that is still ongoing. We have a student here who's looking at kind of the like vascular bundles within ryegrass. It's
Deep.
super detailed.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of ryegrass work going on. I think the biggest thing that a lot of people, and we talked about this earlier this week, a lot of people are really interested and excited for this modeling work that's going on. So we're taking the sensor data. We have superintendents all over the globe that are providing weekly survey data.
Mhm.
Um, we have historical data from those supers saying like these are the years that we had a lot of damage, and so we can now go back and look at those with satellite imagery. And so we're starting to put all of this together into some modeling so that we can figure out kind of when you might expect the worst damage. And I think that's
So
kind
the
of
characteristics of winter
Mhm.
that will likely lead
Yeah,
to the what we call winter kill.
right. Because I think that's just one of the biggest unknowns right now is, and the reason that we organized this project the way that we did was because it's so hard to get predictable winter kill. And so we have to have a lot of sites that we can look at. Um,
Have we been
so
getting enough winter kill at these sites?
we get some every year, not necessarily a ton every year, but again, that's why we have, 100 plus superintendents all over the globe collecting data for us. We have all these research centers where we're collecting data, because it is so hard. So even having those, handful of incidents
And
every
it's
year.
primarily putting greens, right, Paige?
That's where all of our sensors are. That's where all of our superintendents are collecting data for us. So yeah, that's
And
kind of the
and
focus.
and are they being told to put the sensor in a spot where they think it will die? Because probably a superintendent might, if they wanted to know that, they would just put it in a bird bath area or a place where water sat. What do you think?
We give them some leeway deciding and where, because it also has to be accessible during the winter, right? So that they can
Okay.
go out and collect the survey data for us in addition to the sensor data. We also
What do you
don't want
mean
it
the
to.
survey data to see if the grass is alive?
So we send out, well, we don't send out. They have a weekly survey that they fill out that talks about like how they go out and measure how much snow cover they have. If there's ice, we want to know that. They take pictures of us, not of us, of the green for
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
And so that's a lot of the stuff that shows up on that dashboard, if they opt in. And so we can then kind of pair that with the sensor data at the end of the season and
So
see.
the dashboard is the basis of the modeling to a certain extent,
Mhm.
right? It's blending the environmental data that they're getting with their observational data, and then eventually in the hopes that I don't know hopes that the grass dies, but from a
Right.
research perspective, we'd like we learn more if the grass dies.
Right.
When you say modeling, is it going to be temperature, moisture? Is it going to be light? What else is going on in these modeling
That's a great
things?
question.
Or what are the sensors measuring?
The sensors that we put out measure gas levels under the green. I don't remember exactly how deep. I think it's like a few inches. Um, and then we do also collect environmental, like temperature, moisture, all of that kind of stuff. Um, we also, if a superintendent has access to that kind of data on their course, we try to pull that as well. So it's a bunch of different things, a lot of which we still don't necessarily know. Like we don't know for sure yet if there's, oxygen level thresholds at which you need to be concerned. That's kind of the next step of this is looking into all of that sensor data and figuring out those kind of threshold numbers. Um, but
And
yeah,
then it's what the hell do you do? I mean,
yeah, then
it's like,
actions
okay,
that you can
give
take.
me a model that tells me, okay, you're screwed this year,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Now
In
what?
5 years, we're going to know, oh, well, it's one of those winters. You're going to lose half your greens.
Right.
Is there any thought of what the hell we're going to tell these? I mean, yeah, we didn't know how they died, but now I'm wondering, how are we just going to leave these guys hanging?
Hopefully not. That's kind of where some of these other projects looking at ice encasement or covering the greens in spring or
Hmm.
fall and top dressing and all of that kind of stuff come into play. So that eventually we can kind of hopefully pair everything that we're doing,
Yeah.
which is a big ask, but that's kind of the end goal is, having some actionable steps that
Has there been anything promising with top dressing or covers? I know in the past there's been some work done on these things.
yeah.
Anything new and promising in this space?
The latest that I've seen out of, I think it was the Oregon group that was doing a lot of the top dressing work, was that there's not like consistent results. There's not necessarily consistent good or bad results as far
Mhm.
as fall top dressing going into winter. Um, so it's a little tricky to parse out kind of recommendations from that because it is
Yeah.
kind of all over the place.
Well, something that's easier to understand might be the disease angle.
Right.
What's up with Paul Koch's work and Kurt, and have they figured anything out that might be new and different from their perspective?
Yeah, Paul just had a recent-ish blog that I can go back and find for us at some point. They're doing a lot of the modeling work. So we have one more year this year. I think they're continuing kind of field truthing the modeling that they're seeing.
All right.
I'd have to go back and look.
Well, that's okay because we only got a few minutes left. How
Yeah.
about telling people how they can stay informed, involved, and then we'll see if there's any questions.
Yeah,
How do they
so
stay informed, involved?
we have the website. We put out blogs every 2-ish weeks, if I can wrangle them from folks. We're on X, so you can follow us with hashtag WinterTurf. We're on LinkedIn, following the same. We have the weekly newsletter. And if you're interested in signing up to collect data, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to get you set up for the following winter. Fingers crossed, we're still kicking by then. And yeah, if you're interested, if you're interested in the sensors, we do have a donation program where you can donate to the program and get a guaranteed sensor for the life of the project.
Yeah, there you go. And we got to get one here at the Big Red, right, Carl?
Yeah, we I don't know why we haven't had one actually.
It's probably
'Cause
because
we
I
did
probably
have
said no. I didn't want to fill out any paperwork. I know Eric asked me to be on this thing, and then I had to spend 4 days gathering everything you needed to submit a grant that's like
It's a
15
big one.
inches thick. And I'm like, yeah, I'm
Yep.
too old for this. I'm happy to be involved and, of course, promote the thing. And certainly we have a fair amount of winter damage that we struggle with every year. But I will say, what I've noticed just from poking around, I love the dashboard because I can look at the pictures superintendents are taking
Yeah.
and look at the thing. And even if I don't know anything, I can understand visually, oh, okay, I wonder if this is like where I'm at. Or if this, boy, it looks like this. I wonder if this is like where I'm at. And again, if you're in places like we are, where, it looks like it's every 2 to 3 years, we're starting to have something that used to be every 10 years. We're starting to have this kill more frequently. This is going to be really useful, even if it's just keeping aware. So, Carl, questions, comments, thoughts from your end?
I think what I find interesting about this is, the long-term research aspect of it. And Paige, you're involved in the lawn version of this, the
Mhm.
LTER at Minnesota, and basically doing this research over a long period of time, not just 2 or 3 years, because these things are very complicated to understand, right? The idea that why do we get winter damage in 22 and not 23 or 4 or 5? Even when we have these monitors out there, it's hard to figure that out. And I think
Yeah.
the long-term aspect of it gives us a better chance of figuring it out.
Yeah.
And to that point, it's hard to predict winter damage. That's something you can, if you follow the blog, also relay to your club of like, we just don't have best practices for covering that are gonna ensure that the turf survives, or acclimation, maybe just it's the weather pattern that is gonna dictate if we get winter kill or not.
And the worst one is when the guy down the road does no dead grass and I got dead grass.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's the worst situation.
Yeah.
how risk averse do you want to be if you're the club down the road who lets me walk out there in February 19th? Is my $20 worth it for you, right? And I think those are things that we don't have the answers to, and I think this project is hopefully moving towards answers.
Yeah. And Paige, I wish I could say you're done with us, but are you still working on the pollinator stuff there with the Bee Lawn project in Minnesota, part of the L-Trek there?
I am. We're also in our final year of funding for
Okay,
that
good.
one.
Oh, good. Well, we'll have you back in May to discuss all the species of plants you guys have found on these
Yes, there's
lawns,
over
which I know.
100. So
Yeah. And then, of course, before we get out of here, are you still fermenting?
I'm not.
You're not
It's too
fermenting?
cold in my house to ferment
It's
anything.
too cold. All right. Paige, great to see you. Thanks for
You
taking
too.
the time to join us. Carl, we're good?
We're all set. We'll see you guys next Thursday. We're gonna have Art DeGaetano on, and we're gonna ask Art if he can warm it up a little bit
Yeah.
and see if he can grant our wish. Thanks
All right.
everybody for joining. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, see you guys. Thanks a lot, Paige. See ya.
Thanks,
Thank
Paige.
you. Bye.
This has been a production of Cornell University. On the web at cornell.edu.